Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inform.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inform.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inform.news/join.
You'd expect to see the North Dakota oil and natural gas industry working at wells and processing facilities. What you might not know is our oil and gas industry also works to build roads, provide school funding, and even protect us from flooding by creating nearly 50,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, our great outdoors, and our schools. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right?
Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. This is our first ever live show, which when we say live, it's fake news because it's not actually live. We're recording this. But it's live as in we are in person. We are at Peacock Alley in Bismarck, where the owner has made the strange decision that what his diners needed to enjoy their meal and drinks was two chubby men haranguing them about politics from the balcony.
Whoa. Be easy with the body shaming here. It's early in the night. Encourage people to eat as many wings and drink as much beer, and tip your wait staff, please.
Yes, there's left wings and right wings available. There's a lot of beautiful people here. Chad and I are also here, and we're going to have a good time. Our guest to open out the show is, we went very diverse with our picks. We have a Democrat from the House, Minority Leader Zach Ista, and we have a Republican from the Senate, Senate Majority Leader David Hogue. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here.
Thanks for being on.
Thanks.
And I want to start because it was. We're joking here at the beginning. It was a somber day.
Yeah.
Losing a member of the House, Representative Josh Christie, who was just on the show.
Talking about AI probably a month ago.
I just a beautiful. Representative Jeremy Olson had just a beautiful tribute to him on the House floor today. A lot of misty eyes out there. He was somebody, Representative, so you and I were talking just before the show. One of the there's not a lot of in the dad caucus, with young kids at home. He was somebody also had a expertise in a emerging technology field that was very important. Right. And I guess losing him, it felt like losing somebody who was very serious about politics, and very good-hearted and kind at a time where it doesn't sometimes feel like we have a lot of those around.
Right.
It's a tough loss. I don't know how you guys feel.
It was just an immensely difficult day in the House. It's been almost a week now since we sort of got word that there was a very serious medical issue with Representative Christie. So I think those of us in the House have had a little bit of time to process what became a finality last evening. And, we've heard so many descriptions of Representative Christie today, and I just remember his warmth, he had this dry wit about him, almost an irreverent sense of humor. I think he would enjoy us being able to joke and laugh a little bit tonight. But, one of the things you can really do well as a legislator is become a subject matter expert in something. And Representative Christie was that for technology policy and AI policy. And I think what speaks so highly to his character is he had developed this AI presentation, and I'm sure he talked to you about it, and it had some fun parts where he used AI to have him, do the Gettysburg Address. He's never spoken those words. And he was speaking Russian at a point, and our Democrats caught wind of it, and Josh, a Republican, said, well, I can give the presentation to you like I do the Republicans, and he did. That's not nothing in this day and age of divisive politics. So just an absolute gem of a human. His wife, Mary, I've worked closely with in constituent service issues when she's filled that role for then Congressman Armstrong. Our hearts just ache for the family, the small children, and the hole that will leave in this session, it's not going to be filled.
Senator, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, concur with Representative Ista. He was a rising star within the legislative arena. We had actually had some dialogue about, again, coming to our caucus and giving that AI presentation that he gave to the House Majority Caucus. He gave me a little preview of that, and I thought it was both entertaining and informative at the same time, and I could tell he was engaged. And our heart aches as well. He had a couple other bills in the hopper. One of them was House Bill 1360, which was an ethics bill, and I thought it was pretty informed for him. He came over to the Senate and wanted to know the Senate perspective on his House bill, realizing that any bill has to pass the House and
That's
the
weird.
Senate.
That doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't. And I was so impressed by the idea that he wanted to get Senate feedback while his House bill was still passing through the House. And I just thought, okay, this is a rising star within the legislative arena, and I was so impressed. I got to meet his wife today, and yeah, you're right. Your heart just breaks. He's got 3 young daughters, and it's such a tragedy.
Devastating. And I will just say also, in terms of the work that he did on his bills, when he was introducing the AI bills, he called me, a month beforehand and said, hey, I'm calling every single lobbyist who might have some interest or some knowledge about AI to feel you out on how you think about this stuff. And I said, I don't know anything about AI. And he explained the bills in a way that was dumb enough for me to understand. And I think that's a skill when you're an expert in something, to be able to talk about it in a way that people understand. So yeah, a pretty sad day. I watched it online, and it was great to see all the senators come over. Governor Armstrong and all the staff were there. It was a heartbreaking day, and it's going to continue to hurt for a long time.
Well, what happened after Representative Olson gave his speech is the House moved to 8th order, because the thing is, you guys have a job to do.
Right.
And the people's business got to go on. We've only got 80 days. And in fact, Representative, I was talking to you, you guys were supposed to have a late session tonight, which we were kind of we're worried about when you were going to show up, or if you were going to show up and move things around. It sounds like the appropriations committees need more time. But how are you feeling about the pace, or where the House is at? I mean, the House is always the crunch, right? They got twice as many members and a lot more bills. So how do you feel about where the House is at this session?
No, our pace is fine. We've had this record number of bills, the most bills we've had since 1991. But we're getting through the work. The committees, I credit Leader LaFour, Speaker Weiss. They really pushed their chairs to move these bills through the policy committee, get them to appropriations, and we're doing that. And we've been in evening session probably more often and earlier than in my other times here, but that's okay. We're here to do work for 80 days. Let's get it done. I think by the time we gavel out on Friday, we'll have fewer than 100 bills left to act on. I think the Senate's already at that number. And I think we're just set up for success going into that second period of the legislative session.
Senator Hogue, speaking of appropriations, one of the things I'm hearing about appropriations is, with the uncertainty about the federal government and potential cuts. I mean, North Dakota, it's somewhere between a fourth and a third of our budget comes from federal funds. Are you guys thinking at all about what happens if the federal funding all of a sudden slows down? Are there contingencies that are being put into these appropriations to make sure that these agencies and these other appropriations don't just fall by the wayside?
Yes, we are. And so we had Congresswoman Fedorchak came to visit us yesterday. And, typically when the congressman comes to address the House and the Senate, it's a kind of a pleasant sort of a cordial discussion on the floor, but we were pressing her on a number of issues because we have that uncertainty that you referred to. The tariffs that President Trump is talking about, I mean, that's a big deal for our North Dakota ag economy. And so, we were, instead of talking about, how far are you living away from the Capitol and have you settled in? It's like, okay, what are these tariffs going to do to our ag economy? And so there are a number of those types of issues where we as a legislature would like to stay focused on what the new administration is how it's going to impact our state budgets. The other one, of course, Senator Hoban, who continues to deliver for North Dakota, he's talking about trying to procure some money for the Red River Water Supply Project, which is a huge project. Aside from the Fargo diversion, which is the largest construction project in our state's history, Red River is almost right behind it. And, 10 years ago, we didn't think that project would get any federal support. But of course, Senator Hoven has delivered once, and we have this impression that he's going to deliver again. And so that will have a dramatic impact, because with the federal government, they always, they talk about billions the way we talk about millions. And so if the federal government is able to deliver on supporting that project, that affects our appropriation process dramatically.
Representative Ista, how are you feeling about the federal funds and what this could mean for the state if we see dramatic cuts?
Yeah, there's a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety and fear out there in our communities. And there's two sort of separate but related issues. There's the federal budget that's being written now and is going to have to pass through Congress and get signed by the 47th president. That's a constant issue. We always have to worry about what a new Congress, a new administration is going to do to deliver for North Dakota. The new issue is we've got these funds that have already been appropriated, promised, awarded through competitive grants that people can't rely on those promises anymore. So we have nonprofits that, I am familiar with some that are basically giving payday loans to another nonprofit so that nonprofit can make payroll for its staff. Others are doing reductions in force of their staff. Our research universities, up at UND, I represent Grand Forks, they have over $4 million in NIH grants and other grants for the health sciences. They're going to find the next cure for Alzheimer's and ALS if we give them the chance. And these are kids, from all across North Dakota doing this work. And the chaotic nature of these cuts, the DOGE, the OMB cuts, whatever is coming out of Washington, people are feeling that in communities too. Whether, is my WIC next? Is my SNAP next? God forbid, is my Social Security next? And who's got access to all this data? So I do have faith that our congressional delegation and the governor are sort of working those inside channels, the sources they have in Washington. But sometimes people need to hear that publicly too, that we're fighting for you. We're going to be there. We need these investments in North Dakota.
There's an interesting bill on the floor today in the in the House, and I'm asking you, Senator Hogue, because you were on the bill. And normally I'm used to doing these shows when I have a computer in front of me, so I can look up the bill numbers. I didn't plan for that contingency of not having that this time, so shame on me. But essentially it was where the majority leaders were going to be briefed on when because essentially legislative council acts as attorneys for the legislature. And so when a lawmaker wants a bill drafted, a lot of times they'll ask the lawyers at legislative council to draft it. They would essentially apprise leadership, you as well, Representative Ista, about it. And my understanding of the intent of the bill was to sort of help with this problem where we have a lot of duplicate bills sometimes, and maybe try to coordinate some of that, just because, again, we have 80 days, we're putting in a lot of work.
Right.
If we can maybe end some of the duplicativeness. It failed, though, today. Or it failed in the House, and there was kind of a leg that you probably didn't know that, maybe.
No, Zach, did you vote for that?
I did, but
good,
when it
good.
failed, I turned to leader of the floor and said, I'm personally insulted that they do not give us this power.
So I guess maybe the better question is better for you is I guess they didn't want leadership to know what bills they might be drafting?
There's this constant sort of back and forth of, I want my bill private and confidential to me until I file it and make it public. And I respect that. I get that. I think a lot of times people want to work, smooth out the rough edges of a bill draft and not roll it out until they're ready. But what we would like, what Representative Lauser brought forward, and this was his idea. He came to leadership and asked if he could sort of spearhead this. Is let's at least CC leadership on this so they have some idea. Okay, there's 25 separate property bills that all are kind of sort of related. Can we get all of you in a room on a Zoom maybe together and work this out in advance so we're not burdening legislative council with this time? We're not burdening our committees with this time.
Because every bill is referred to committee, gets a committee hearing, gets
Exactly.
committee work, gets a floor vote.
And I love our tradition in North Dakota that every bill gets a hearing, gets a floor vote, doesn't get buried in a desk.
Disagree.
Amen,
It's a
brother.
great part of it. But can we sort of on the top end get our heads together and not just worry about who gets credit, but let's make better public.
Do you feel the same way? You supported that bill, obviously, your co-sponsor.
I did. I think the sweet spot for the North Dakota legislature, given our constitutional constraints, 80 days, and of course we don't want to meet for 80 days. We always want to meet for something like 75 or 74. I think the sweet spot is between 700 and 800 bills. And after you go over 800 bills, if you do the math, you start dividing out the bills among all the policy committees and appropriations, you start running out of time because then what it becomes is it becomes busy work where you're trying to pump out bills and you don't have the ability to focus on the important bills, and you just sort of lose sight. The process takes you over and you don't get a chance to churn out good quality work. And so I'm in full support of limiting the number of bills that can be introduced in any one session, and I've got a couple ideas to do that. But Representative Lauser's bill to say, hey, let leadership see what your bill is about to see if we can streamline the process and avoid duplication. I'm all for
And I
that.
forget, like, if you were a Democrat, if you're part of the Democratic caucus, it would have come to you.
That's-
and not
that's
necessarily.
right.
So if
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
concern about
exactly.
partisan, whatever, espionage, I guess.
So I want to talk about one of the important things. I mean, Rob and I have not talked about property taxes at all on this podcast. Why don't we start doing that now? Obviously, a big movement towards relief and reform. But I want to talk about something very specific that was in the Fargo Forum today. There was a bill that was passed, House Bill 1144, that has to do with bathrooms and school bathrooms. They passed a bill that said, the House passed a bill, I believe, that said we can't have sinks that are shared by boys and girls as part of the transgender bill. The West Fargo School District said that will cost them around $8 million to implement. Now, if this bill passes the Senate, I hope based on your laughter it's not going to, but if that passes the Senate, the only way to pay for that $8 million renovation is through property taxes. So sometimes I get frustrated with the legislature. There's legislators saying we have to do something about property taxes, and then they make all these decisions that make property taxes go up. Can you guys talk about sort of where we're at with property taxes, that specific example, how you feeling about things?
Take it away, Senator.
Why don't you look at each other? And,
Your question causes me to want to have to go to the bathroom. So
well, hopefully you'll be able to wash your hands by yourself. We'd hate for that.
No.
But seriously, I mean, those kind of things, I mean, often legislators don't think about the fact they're doing things to cause property taxes to go up. So maybe it's a House Bills Act. You want to talk about that? And then if you want to talk about generally where we're at with property tax reform.
Let's start with that, Bill, because during that floor debate, it was said apparently without irony that sinks are intimate spaces. I have a lot of questions about what's happening in these sinks. That the folk sink is particularly intimate. And that article you mentioned from the forum caught my eye today. It referenced my elementary school. I went to Eastwood Elementary in West Fargo, and I've been telling people, I remember the boys went to the right, the girls went to the left. We came out around sink, we hit the pedal, and everybody washed their hands together. I have yet to, have any ill effects from that. And I think sometimes on these culture wars, if your reason for running is to stick it to transgender kids, in North Dakota, you've won the war. Stop fighting the battles. We've lost the plot here if we're talking about intimate spaces of sinks, and it's going to have real consequences. Representative Jonas from West Fargo, member of the school board there, brought this up on the floor, so it passed with full knowledge of that. Just one of those times we might actually need the Senate's help to fix it. But, property tax, they might have acted on those in the Appropriations Committee while we've been waiting to film today, but I think there's a lot of momentum. Governor Armstrong's plan that Representative Nathy was the prime sponsor, that's House Bill 1176.
Representative Nathy asked me to stop calling it the governor's plan, by the way. He told me. He says he goes, there's other people on that bill, too.
it's Senator Nathy's plan.
Senator Nathy?
Yes. Maybe I'll call it the Mike LaFleur plan. We can all agree on that. It's, I think it's got the outlines of a great bill. What I like most about what Governor Armstrong keeps talking about is let's keep the first thing, and that's relief for homeowners. I know our friends in the ag community, in the commercial sector, those that have centrally assessed property, they're asking for a little bit of relief too if we're going to tackle this. But let's keep the first thing first, get those homeowners that primary residence credit.
Well, they have a separate bill, too. Is it? I think Senator Myrtle's on the bill. I forget who the sponsor is.
And there's
Separate
there's
divide
similar
out the bill.
ideas with Speaker Weiss as a bill on the House side. And the House Tax Committee took this strategy. We're going to send about three big ideas: the Nathy, LaFleur, Armstrong bill, the Weiss bill, and the Lauser bill that does a little bit of a bite on. They can probably all be reconciled eventually, but we're at that stage of the session where these are sort of opening offers, right? The House is going to pass a couple bills, slide it across the table. I doubt the Senate is just going to, pass these bills and we're not going to have a conference committee. So I think a little bit of patience is in order to see where they come. But we're starting to see that outlines of we're going to grow the primary residence credit. We're going to have a side conversation about whether other types of property taxes should see some relief this time. And then on the reform side, I just spoke to the cities, counties, school districts who are meeting in Bismarck today. I spoke to them and said, the train has left the station. Some sort of caps are coming your way. And I know you're being asked to do more with less. It feels unfair, but that's the reality.
Well, it's got to come from somewhere. I mean, if the voters are upset about their property taxes and we're not going to solve that problem locally, then what other tool does the legislature have but caps, Senator?
Well, great question, Rob. Senator Weber, who's the chair of the Finance and Tax Committee, has a separate proposal, which is to cap political subdivisions altogether and say it's not just property tax revenue, it's total revenue. And I don't know that it's going to pass the Senate, but in the idea of caps is
the
not
other big one, sales taxes, is kind of already capped in that they can only go, 3 points above the state rate?
But I mean, the idea of caps is not just a cap; it's to control the growth of local government, because that's what drives property taxes. And so, I don't think we should shy away from alternative proposals than just a 3% cap on property taxes.
So it seems like the heavy lifting on the first side of the session was on the House side. It's now coming over to you guys. I mean, so Zach said they're sending over 3 bills, probably maybe more. So what does that process look like with Senator Weber's committee? I mean, are you going to try to combine all those? I mean, I think reform relief, we all agree that's got to be part of it. It can't just be one or the other. But what do you think the Senate ends up doing here?
Well, I think House Bill 1176 will be the vehicle. I know the House wants to send a marriage penalty tax bill. I don't think we'll take a hard look at that, but could be wrong. But I think fundamentally what we want to do is both the House and Senate agree that if there are not caps, we will not have succeeded in passing some significant property tax reform. So I think, as Zach said, talking to the political sub leadership, a cap is going to be established. It's probably going to be 3% with some flexibility for elections to deviate from that. And then I think probably the areas where the House and the Senate are not settled is the House is apparently going to pass over a $1,450 primary residence tax credit. I don't think the Senate will go that high. We passed the $500 primary residence tax credit. If we went to $1,000, we would double that, and we think that would be a pretty good win for this session. But I don't see us doubling it to $1,450.
The governor, when he was on the podcast last week, because I think the cap's the linchpin to all of this. If we don't have an effective cap that really draws down or slows down, it's going to continue to outpace any sort of a credit or buy down that we do, which has been the problem in the past. The governor was really concerned about the NATHE bill that got amended to add essentially letting political subs ask the voters to opt out after 10 years. He kind of implied it's not a cap anymore if that's in there. Are you guys concerned about that as well?
I think the House is, and I think House Appropriations made an amendment to that just this week to take it from 10 down to 4. I think Leader LaFleur brought in an amendment.
That's right. I knew that.
And I've spoken with the governor about that too. I think he says you can drive a grain truck through it, and he might be right. And I'm maybe a little less concerned than he is. I don't think cities and counties are just going to put it on the ballot in perpetuity until it passes. And those folks are responsive to their voters too, right? There's always the power of the ballot box to say, you're not listening to us. We want a tighter cap. Let's do it. But I think there's just going to be a swing, from the county and city's perspective that they're not going to like, where we're going to put some caps on them, and maybe we have to come back in a decade and say we swung too far that way, and let's fix it.
Well, that's and the thing is too. I mean, there comes a point. I think it does change the narrative where if there's a vote that the locals took and they set aside their cap for 4 years or whatever it is, at that point, one of the problems we have now is local property taxes go up and then people complain to the legislature. I think at that point, it changes the narrative a little bit. We could say, listen, you just held a vote 2 cycles ago, and you voted for this. So fix it locally. This is your baby. I like that. I mean, at least it changes the narrative.
I don't like that at all.
You don't like that at all?
We played, that song has been played many times.
So you don't want to.
I want to remove as many avenues to get around the cap as possible, because we've seen all of those things play out, going back to 2009, where it's like, okay, if you have a vote, you can do it. No, we don't want that because it hasn't worked. We're trying to learn from our history, and the fact is, if we impose stringent caps, we're going to come back in 2 years, and if we see that, let's say the rural counties, the rural school districts are really hurting, we're going to adjust. But I think the best approach, as long as we're doing caps, is to be as restrictive as we can be, and then loosen those restrictions when we see that, yeah. But to say we're going to have all these safety valves for elections, and you can bank it, and you can go if you're
So did you not even the original bill allowed them to bank it up for
Yeah.
you didn't even like that?
No.
So
And that's just history. That's not me trying to be onerous. It's just, let's look at our history here.
Shifting gears slightly, one of the more entertaining things that's happening this session is the discussion about mandatory minimums between the Attorney General and Governor and the Department of Corrections. You're both attorneys. This is probably something that you both have opinions on. How do you see this playing out, and how can we get the Governor's office and the Attorney General maybe to play nicer together? While it's entertaining for a podcast, I'm not sure it makes the best policy.
Well, it's only fair that we had to take, the bullet on property tax in the House first. The Senate has to deal with truth in sentencing. So we'll have at it.
Yeah, Chad, it's a great question. Our caucus, I just came from our caucus meeting. We meet Wednesday nights. This is the second week in a row that we have debated this policy, because really it sort of fuses, fiscal policy with penology and what do you do? So you've got how long do you want to punish people for a certain crime? How to what extent do you want to deny them rehabilitation services? And if you're going to do those things, if you want to punish them longer, you have to pay for that. And that means that you have to be willing to, because of our current capacity constraints, you have to be willing to spend money to lease space either from the counties or from some out-of-state facilities. And so we're having that debate in the Senate. And I can tell you, between that and our school choice bill, those are the top two issues in the Senate, where I can't tell you where the Senate is going to land on those, because I don't. They're so complex because they involve competing policy issues and fiscal issues. There's just I don't know where we're going to land.
One thing I've struggled with is evidence that recidivism. I mean, because that's the big argument is crime rates have gone up because we're letting people out of jail who are recidivating. And so, but I've yet to see evidence that anywhere that has implemented this, including at the federal level, which seems to be backing away from these sorts of things, I don't know that it helps. I feel like we just keep people in jail longer, and the people who are going to recidivate still recidivate.
It is a real problem. I mean, I think Democrats sometimes get labeled nationally soft on crime or something like that. I worked for 4 years as a prosecutor. I don't shy away from. Sometimes people need to spend significant time in the state pen, and we should be doing that for the people that are. But where I get a little worried about this proposal is it's kind of a callback to the early 90s tough on crime era. I think we have swung away from that. Even, I'm going to take a risk here and say something good about the first Trump administration. I think even that administration sort of recognized that it's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It's a safe space.
Even stop clocks are right twice.
That's true. And I think even at that national level, there was a focus on we can't just go back to this. Let's lock people up. I'm not a big fan of this. I think the bill still has, I haven't checked the amendments lately, a mandatory minimum of like 15 days for fleeing law enforcement. You shouldn't flee law enforcement. It is a problem in some cities. I don't know what is solved by putting somebody in local county jail for 15 days.
I think the argument is it's a deterrent. And I think the way it's written, too, it's like it's 15 days. So if they have an additional crime where they go to the pen, when they get out of the pen, they then have to go to the county jail to serve that mandatory 15 days. And I don't know anybody who's in that situation where they're going to take a swing at a police officer, or when they see the lights, hit the gas instead of the brakes and pulling over. I don't know anybody who's thinking, boy, if I do that, I might get a mandatory 15-day sentence. Like, I don't think that's going through any of their minds.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
I mean,
to me.
deterrence, you look at, criminal justice studies, deterrence absolutely one of the goals of our criminal justice system. So is punishment. So is rehabilitation. And I hope we can get it away from what's kind of emerging as a personality conflict. I have no doubt the Attorney General has earnest, good faith, well-researched, well-informed views on this. He has spent his career in law enforcement. I also trust Colby Braun, the head of DOCR. I don't think he's trying to put dangerous people back in Grand Forks or Fargo or Minot or anything like that. Cooler heads are going to have to prevail at some point. I think the Senate's going to send us over something or maybe nothing in that regard. But no matter what, the conversation's probably not going to end there. There's a lot of strong-willed folks with disagreements on this, and let's try to get it right and just set aside the bickering.
Well, I think that's the time we have. We're going to wrap it up. Gentlemen, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
The work done by the thousands of North Dakota oil and natural gas workers is working to improve energy independence and national security. Working to make America more competitive around the world. And working to provide a better today and tomorrow for everyone in North Dakota and across our country. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas works for our future. North Dakota Petroleum Foundation, advancing the possibilities.
Welcome back to Plain Talk, where we are at Peacock Alley in downtown Bismarck, spending time with a bunch of people who like to spend an evening watching a podcast.
A bunch is a stretch.
Wow.
So it's a respectable.
That is the voice of the currently unemployed Erin Oban.
It's called a sabbatical, and I'm going to Cancun tomorrow, so I've got no complaints.
Yeah, she's doing better than all of us.
Doing okay.
She's doing it right.
So you guys glad you guys get on the legislature right
Are you going to introduce them?
I guess the other one, Jessica Bell. Yeah, the other.
Hi, hello.
Former State Senator Jessica Bell, former State Senator Erin Oban. How glad are you guys that you're not in the legislature right now? Scale of 1 to 10.
11?
Well, yeah, 15-ish. I don't know. I was up there today, and I have been up a couple of times this session, and I miss the people. It's really, really great to see everybody when I get up there, but it's really nice to take the heavy stuff and hand it over to
By the way,
folks,
we all
so.
knew you were there because they introduced you from the podium.
Don't even start me, Chad.
Yeah.
Don't even start.
How dare you stand in the back of the Senate and not expect to be announced when you're there when they gavel in, Jess? You know how this works.
And she had a sign that said, "I'm Senator former
Here I
Senator
am.
Jessica.
Do you know what
Please introduce me."
I don't show up in the legislative chamber very often, but when I do, I get yelled at the sergeant at arms for leaning on the rail.
He told me I couldn't come in because they don't let you in right before a session starts. So I actually had to have another senator come in and
Escort you in.
escort me into
Well,
the
I came well before that ridiculous hour rule. Is Hogue still here? I mean,
Senator Hogue.
Yep.
Page him
Out on
that
that roll. But I was there on Monday. It was President's Day. Evan, wanted to take in a little bit of the activity, and by activity I mean snacks.
Yes.
Well, but
Good
he also
snacks.
got to go and see the governor. I mean, Evan's access to politicians is really impressive. He's just never on message from my perspective.
I heard he asked the governor where his Dodgers hat was.
Yeah, he did. So he's sort of on message.
Did ask the
Well,
governor.
that is on message. That's
So,
good.
so I want to ask, Erin, you never really answered the question how much you miss it. I know the answer.
I did too. I said 11.
She did.
Okay, you missed it.
I just
Sorry.
had to
Yeah,
beat
weird.
her.
We don't listen to each other. I'm shocked.
So you guys, I think, Erin, you served just short of 8 years. You served 10 years or 8
10.
years? So during your time, basically 2012 to 2022, 2014 to 2022, what changed? I think both of you, when you were no longer there, saw a different legislature, and based on the fact that you're now saying, I'm glad I'm not there. So what did change over that period of time?
It wasn't fun anymore. And I can't remember exactly when that happened, but there was a shift in the mood and the feel and the focus on the policy, because I'm a super policy geek. I was the policy geek in our little friend group. I was the one who was like, "Oh, give me that. I'm gonna fix it, write it up."
You're adorably boring.
Yes, adorably boring. I love taxes. I love low taxes.
Well, I was gonna say,
I love
now
low
we're talking.
To be clear,
Low
she's
taxes.
like, yeah.
Congresswoman Fedorchuk addressed the House and Senate this week. I had notes for a column where I was going to write about how refreshingly boring she is.
She was
And,
refreshing.
and not as an insult at all. Like, just I am tired of being entertained by politicians.
Yeah.
And that is probably the shift. Entertainment. Was,
Yes, I think I got very long-winded when I left the Senate, and if you could go back in time and when Senator Poolman made her speech on the floor of the Senate announcing she was not going to be running again, if that camera, and thank goodness it didn't, pan from being on Nicole, which was
I had
also on you.
the edge of me.
You were,
I was
you were
doing
right
this,
next to
yeah.
her. If
Ugly
it were
cry.
to pan over to me, I was sobbing. I was literally sobbing because so much of what Nicole was saying at the time is exactly how I was feeling. And I knew I was not going to run again. I just was not going to announce it during the session. It was, I describe it as having to be surrounded by the most simple form of like talk radio you can find and never being able to turn it off.
And no offense to Michael Bell, who's in the audience.
Certainly not.
Hey, Happy.
Hey.
How much of it was the camera being there? Because I thought, like, at Congress, they used to talk about the C-SPAN effect, where all of a sudden they got cameras in the chamber and the speeches got longer and the charts got more elaborate. And even cameras.
I wish
even,
the charts were elaborate, frankly.
Well, okay. Well, but even cameras, like even as a sort of metaphor for the larger social medias there.
Yeah,
Where
the audience, the platform.
there's an audience
Should
now for
probably
this
go
stuff.
back
that-
and look when the cameras started in the committee rooms, because
which, by the way, I think it's good.
I
think
know
it's
you
good.
think it's good. I have never quite gotten there, and I get into a lot of arguments about this because I think you should have to put pants on to be able to go engage in your government. And so
Disagree.
This is the first time I've recorded this podcast with pants on.
this is too much information. No.
No, oh, come on. They're tough.
Sure, I suppose there's a couple of people. I don't think it is. When I heard you characterize it like that, Rob, and I'm sure there are a couple folks who do perform for the cameras. I also think it is a way to show people what is happening in their legislature, and I think they should see that. I think they should see the way their elected officials act,
Good
the
and
words
bad.
they use. Yep, the way they contribute or don't contribute, and whether or not that makes a difference in who they're electing is up to them. But I don't think a lot of it is performative. I think it is exactly who they are, and it just happens to be in front of a camera and in front of a microphone now.
So I jokingly, not jokingly, I put down a campaign finance report in front of Jessica, and we sat down here that Jessica contributed to Erin's opponent in 2014. I did that sort of to be funny and to zing you a little bit.
Yeah, I deserve it.
Yeah, but more importantly, I think it shows something of the change in the legislature and sort of the moderation. Jessica, I remember when you came in, you're the most conservative senator I knew. At least that's what I thought in my head. Fast forward 10 years, I'm supporting you in a primary, hoping
you
that
did, and
you
thank
win.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about that sort of ideological change that you experienced, and also you guys also have something
Did
in
you
common.
experience any
Yeah.
ideological change? 'Cause
Not
I'm not sure
you,
she
the
did.
session.
The session, yeah. No, I did not. My mom said I came out conservative, and I just haven't changed since then. I think Erin can probably attest to that, because we didn't see eye to eye on those policy issues. But I really appreciate you as a friend.
Well, it's not past tense. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you while we were there, going through the trenches, the warfare of a legislative session. But I had forgotten that I had made this campaign
Chad
contribution.
Oban never forgets when it comes to things like
doesn't.
this.
Well, neither
So
does the
important.
Secretary of State, keeping all of these things on record. Everyone can access. Shout out to Michael Howe. But I like this too, because it does demonstrate that that you can come in with a very conservative mindset. You can work across the aisle, even when you don't have to, because Republicans haven't had to work across the aisle. That doesn't mean that those perspectives aren't important. And I would guess, I'm not sure that changed about me from when I started to when I finished, but I think I realized it in a way that I couldn't appreciate before I served. Until you're the one who's there every day, pushing those buttons, picking yes or no. In fact, my husband was giving me grief the other day about, we're geeks. We were watching a video on our way home of the House floor, And he was like, I hate that when they say vote green and vote red. And I was like, well, that's the color of the buttons. So you want to be super clear because not all pieces of legislation are understood because they're not going through.
You hear the by the way, voting red does this, right?
Yes.
And which I'm thankful for because sometimes I don't understand.
I am also thankful for it, but I think that perspective changes once you're the one actually pushing the button because, well, Chad, you've had a front row seat for Erin's time in the legislature. You can relate, but you can't fully understand what it is that she had gone through while making all those decisions. And so having to have when I came in, I had a very idealistic way of how I thought I felt about issues until all of a sudden you're reading black and white words and you're like, oh wait, if I do this happens. And I think that was one of the things, like when things started to change that we said quite often was the words matter. It's not just the talking point. It's not the 5-second clip that's going to catch you in a campaign. It's what the actual bill says. And we lost a lot of that because you get the gotcha stuff. And I think that was actually part of the Christ the King debate, which was the debate we were watching on our drive home the other day, was a gotcha bill. It was a gotcha bill.
Yeah, it was a perfect description of what it was.
So, Erin, I think you guys also have, Zach Ista referred to it earlier today, being a dad, right? You guys also were moms serving together, and I think there is a little bit of the kinship around being a female, being a mom, with not a lot of other moms. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, let's correct that because
Please
there are
do.
a lot of parents.
I'm surprised that you correct me in public.
All right.
Like a day. I mean, if I got paid for this, if I got paid for correcting Chad Oban,
She'd be a rich woman.
Rich woman.
One thing I'm not getting paid for is being a marriage counselor. So let's get back on topic.
We're doing fine.
I am going to avoid the very obvious joke I would otherwise make at Robport's expense because your wife is lovely.
Yeah. Wow. I don't.
She is.
Yeah. No, she
Why
is.
would you say wow to that, Rob?
I don't know why she's coming at me.
Oh, that's what she does. So anyway, Erin,
Okay.
you're a woman in a sense. You were a woman.
I think that, like, there are a lot of parents in the legislature, probably more parents than there are not parents, but not at the generation we are at, not at the, like, kids in your
young
household.
kids.
Yes.
School age.
That's actually what I meant.
I know it's what you meant, but it also disregards
matter.
people. Words matter, thanks.
Oh, geez, you guys, easy.
But I think one of the things that was maybe easy for Jess and I to establish a relationship, around and be able to set aside those very distinct policy differences that we have. We're also like women who graduated around the same time. We grew up in very small towns. We experienced very similar things growing up in small towns. And then we're raising kids, around the same time. Her kids are a little bit older than ours are, but those are also bonding experiences and ways to relate to people where if you form those relationships with the people you serve with, it makes it so much harder to not see them as a person when you disagree with them on policy. And while I worked really hard to establish relationships with people, especially as a member of the minority and then super minority, but by the time I left, it became harder for me to separate those things. And I knew that was not going to be helpful in me being able to serve in a way I felt my district deserved to be served. So
we've been talking about sort of the transition in the time of your guys' tenure in the Senate, how it's even changed since. And I don't think the evolution's stopping. First of all, I mean, there's a political realignment going on to where I was talking to somebody today where we're using terms like liberal and conservative. And the problem is, what are those definitions anymore? Because it's difficult. I don't know that there's good ones right now. And also we have term limits looming. So, that's my question is what does the next 10 years look like in the legislature as those term limits set in? We're going to see a lot of experience leave the legislature. What's the future of this body, Jess? Let's start with you.
Well, my biggest concern with term limits has been and continues to be, and I love our legislative council staff. They saved my butt more times than I can even count. but it gives all
They've
of,
had a lot of turnover too, by the way.
They have had a lot of turnover. There are a handful that I still see when I'm up at the Capitol that I grab and hug quick before I move on to my next thing. They hold a lot of power, and that I don't think was something that people thought about when they voted for that measure, because legislative council, they're going to be the only people that know exactly what's going on and what motions need to be made and how things have always been done. And you losing that that knowledge base within your elected officials, I think really can cause some long-term problems. It's going to change the way things are done. And that can be said for, administrative issues as well. You take a look at the federal government, for example. There's a lot of power. There's a power struggle really right now with executive orders, and there has been for the last 15 years or so, trying to figure out what those boundaries of an administration is, because you have a Congress that's not functional. So I think it's just, that is a precursor to what we're going to see here in North Dakota.
I was just going to make that point. It feels like we talk all the time about how different North Dakota is than Washington, D.C. And I think in a lot of ways it's right. But I feel like we're heading there with the messaging bills.
I mean, we act like we're immune to what's happening.
Right.
And
I just feel like we're further back on the curve.
right. Like we are with a lot of things in North Dakota. I mean, we sort of joke a lot about like fashion trends and music trends and.
Well, I don't know why you're taking shots at North
Oh
Dakota.
my God, it's not. Why are you so sensitive, Rob?
Well, yeah, we just lay off him.
I think we got some claps from the audience.
there was-
I know.
I don't know who that was, but it was mean.
It's probably Rob's
It
wife.
was probably your mom. I like
Tammy.
So, thinking again about the legislature, I had a really great question at the tip of my tongue, and now I can't remember what it is. Do you got anything?
Sweetie.
Well, I think we
sweetie.
could, where we are. I mean, I'm worried that we're going to get to a point where our legislature, especially as restrained as it is, and about to become even more restrained when we start losing. I mean, the executive branch is about to become a lot more powerful, just because there's inertia there that's not going to exist in the legislature. They already had an advantage. I worry that we're going to move into a place where we have a lot of, and as much as I think we all respect our current governor here, the executive branch is going to have a lot more power. I worry that we're going to get to a place where our legislature becomes very dysfunctional. The executive branch is going to step into a power vacuum. And maybe it's never going to be quite as acute as it is in Washington, D.C., but I worry that we're heading for a bad place.
So I think about the passage of the term limits measure similarly to the way I think about the way we made decisions. You make your decisions with the information you have, and I don't think that there was enough understanding and information about what the inner workings of that place is like and what happens when you remove. There should be some balance between a lot of experience and new perspective. I think that's really helpful in decision making. I don't think it'll be shocking to believe that I think the more diverse opinions you have, the more well-informed you can make decisions. And I really don't think that it's going to be good in the long run, what we did with term limits.
So I remembered my question. It only took me 5 minutes. Good job. So we had Senator Heitkamp on here probably 6 months ago or so, and we talked about the lack of moderates in the U.S. Senate. And she pushed back on me when I said that. She basically said, ideology isn't what the problem is here. It's personality. She talked about James Lankford being willing to work on immigration, even though he's very, very conservative. I think you guys are an example of, it doesn't matter what your ideology is. If you guys have something you agree on, you're willing to work on it. Do you think that's missing in the North Dakota legislature, or is there less of it now where it's people who are willing to work with folks who disagree with each other?
Well, I mean, it's tough to make that comparison between Republicans and Democrats because of the
you got so many.
Because of the supermajority and the superminority
Right.
issue. But you can look within the Republican caucus and certainly find some of those things. And I'm an outsider now, so I don't know. I can't see what's happening in caucus meetings like they hold on nights like tonight on Wednesday nights. But I struggle to see that that's happening right now. But maybe it is, and I just can't from where I'm at.
I maybe from another perspective, I could see that being true. I have been surprised by the number of people. I'll use the example of this just really wonderful older gentleman from a very small town who texted me right after this last election and said, "I don't understand why you're losing your job at USDA just because you work for because you got this job from Joe Biden. You're doing a good job. Why wouldn't you stay?" Like,
Oh, sweetie.
oh, sweetie, I know. Which I appreciate very much. He said, "You've never treated anybody differently because you know I'm a Republican, but you know, I don't
Was
care."
that my dad? Since I gave him your
No.
cell
Oh,
phone
that-
number.
Who did? But
Poor Erin.
I think when you show people that you just want to do a good job, and that should require working with people respectfully and with whom you don't agree on everything, then I think there should be a place for you. But that is not the system we're in.
Last question, and it's the question that I like to bring up all the time and everybody hates because there's no good answer for it. But I perceive a lot of these problems as being driven by voters. I feel like a lot of the performative stuff, a lot of it is voters want it, as evidenced by the fact that a lot of the people who are doing it are not having any problems getting reelected. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know what happens when the electorate stops valuing the things that they value. I worry that democracy does not reward people who tell the voters that they're wrong, even when they're wrong, because the voters can be wrong. I mean, people can talk about we the people and stuff all the time, and that's great, and sure, in the aggregate it works, but there are times where it gets very frustrating. And so I don't know what the answer is for that. I don't know what you do when the voters they want things that aren't good.
So I want to hear both of you say the voters are not any good and you don't trust them.
That's why everybody hates this question.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. I have a way to evade answering the question.
Very good.
So
Let's hear
You
it.
may be out of the Senate, but you're still a senator.
Yes. I can't get the politician out of me. It actually triggered something that I remember us talking about when I first started in the legislature, and that was that social media was really changing things, because I didn't have social media until like the late 2000s. I was a late bloomer. And so it really, Facebook started taking hold for people over the age of probably 35 during our time in the legislature. A little bit before that, but it really started to get prevalent for my grandma to have Facebook during that time. And I think that to the performative piece, I think that certainly has impacted the way we share information and the way that we do things. But if we're going to be going back in time with these conversations, which I just love, I'm actually going to tap into that 28-year-old me that started in the Senate, that had those ideals of how the system was supposed to work. I think that the way our founding fathers structured our government is obviously the only form that works, and that will prevail in the end, even through the social media challenges, the access, the shift in how people are thinking and consuming information. I have a belief in the system that it is going to prevail. And I actually just came to this conclusion earlier this week with one of my long car rides with my husband again. We just had this conversation, and I have this faith that it's going to work. Erin?
I appreciate.
Erin, do you have faith?
Do you have faith?
I have to.
Right?
I'm a Democrat who lives in North Dakota. You have to have faith. So I think.
Also, what's the alternative?
What does that mean? Moving?
Well, no, to democracy.
faith.
No, to democracy. I mean, what's...
Fair. I think confirmation bias, that encompasses the social media part, the cable news, the talk show, whatever it is. Confirmation bias to me is terrifying. I laughed a lot, and in a kind of endearing way, when you had Representative Nathy on, and he talked about going door to door. It almost sounded like that was the first time in a long time Representative Nathy has done that. And maybe it is. I don't know. My perspective is so different because I served in a district where that was not an assumption. Nothing was an assumption. I worked my rear end, filtering myself, because I knew I had to. This was a district that I assumed I would not win. And I knew I was talking to a lot of people that did not agree with me. And so I'd never pretended to be somebody I wasn't. I never pretended to believe things I don't. If we disagreed at the door, I said, we're just not going to agree with each other on this. And if you don't want me to represent you, I respect that. I won't respect you well if you want me to agree on everything with you. If you trust that I will make the decisions to the best of my knowledge based on the information I have, I will try really hard to set aside the biases I have. But I will come in with biases because we do. That all of us do. So I fear we've gotten further away from our voters, from the people who are electing us, in part because they've allowed us to, in part because it has become so polarized, and people people assume that they won't ever be challenged. And unfortunately, I don't think you ever made that assumption, but you got it from the other side. And you probably assumed a Democrat was never going to, take you out. I'm sure when you started, you didn't assume you're somebody from the right would.
They did not.
Yeah.
Absolutely did not.
And I know you love when we use your race as an example of what's wrong with our elections.
Every time I yell at you both. Every time. But I get it.
You help the coal industry. You do everything right by your district, and they throw you out. I mean, we can be frustrated for you and use it as an example of how that's when the voters got wrong.
Well, we're going to put a pin in it there. Thank you, J. Bell, Erin. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks,
Thanks,
for having
fellas.
us.
By the way, J. Bell and Eho. Erin, hello there.
Rob said he won't use it. Thank you, guys. Go unload the dishwasher.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, do you have a question, comment, or something you want us to discuss on the show?
We want to hear from you.
Leave a voicemail or send a text to 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141, and we might feature it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening to Plain Talk. Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back to Plain Talk, where you're probably hearing peals of laughter because our producer announced to the audience that Chad and I will be taking pictures with them afterwards. And I guarantee you nobody in this crowd wants pictures with us.
I guarantee everyone wants pictures with us. Look at them. Look at their... Michael Bell wants pictures. Corey Mock wants pictures.
Michael Bell gave me a hat during the interim.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to brag, but he gave me a hat a couple days ago.
Well, all right. We got some...
By the way, I think we're dropping Michael Bell's name too much.
Too much.
Yeah.
Too many plugs.
It should be M. Bell.
M. Bell. All right. Some gentleman from the radio industry.
Some random guy walking around downtown Bismarck.
We've done enough on
Okay,
Michael
we're
Bell.
good.
All right. We got some listener texts because we have that phone number that plays all the time that I have not memorized at all, so I don't know what the phone number is. Listen to the end credits and you'll hear the phone number that you can call or text.
Great hosting.
I know.
Like, great host.
You almost saw I've done this before.
Yeah.
Jim in West Fargo texted, said, enjoyed the cast on this truth and sentencing crusade of Wrigley's. Well done. So somebody enjoying, like you said, entertained.
Yeah, it was a very entertaining interview that Erin and you did with Mr. Wrigley a week or two ago.
It was.
Something. Maybe interview's the wrong word.
We also got some questions from the crowd here in Bismarck. Kelsey writes, great show and wings, which I haven't had any of the wings, but there are left wings and right wings.
I have not had any wings either. I'm hoping that some people save us some wings for when we're done in about 30 minutes.
Well, I kind of want to know what tastes better, the left wing or the right wing.
Well, I mean, agree to disagree.
Okay.
On that one.
Okay, so Kelsey asks, what surprised you most through doing the podcast, most memorable guest? So, I don't know, Chad, I kind of invited you into this to do it. Yeah. And at the time, I was inviting a lot of different people. I was kind of I've been doing the podcast for a while. I'll be honest, I was trying to find my way. Like, I didn't, I couldn't find really the flow that worked for me. And I think you and I hit it off when we started doing it. In fact, somebody texted and just said, you and Chad got a good chemistry. And I said, and I agreed. I really enjoy doing it.
So I find that I generally have a good chemistry with most people, Rob. That might not be the case for you, but that's sort of where I'm at. Listen, they're eating this up right now. They're eating it up. No, it's well, what surprises me about I am a little surprised at how much I enjoy it. Like, I look forward to sort of having an outlet that I don't normally get, talking about politics and policy and all those different things. I also think, I mean, you and I agree on quite a few things in sort of this strange political world we're currently in right now.
Yeah.
That's a little surprising.
I think it's, but I think it's a product that we can usually find our way to agreeing on it. We don't necessarily start out agreeing.
Right.
I think if we talk through it, we can find a place that we can both live with, which is how this is all supposed to work.
And I think the guests that I enjoy the most are ones that I don't have strong opinions on the policies we're talking about. We talked about Josh Christie the other day, AI. I mean, that was interesting.
That was a fantastic interview.
Because I didn't know anything about that. I think conversations we've had about the gentleman we had on recently from the Jewish defamation, I thought that was an interesting conversation. I think there were some visuals that were a little strange there, but I always enjoyed.
Our guest kind of forgot that show is an audio medium.
Right. But you know what my favorite show we've done is? Do you remember the opening day where I and Kelly Armstrong just talked for an hour about baseball?
Yeah.
That was really good.
We enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I don't know if the audience enjoyed it.
Yeah, the listenership was 7 for that one.
They love it when we talk baseball.
Yeah. By the way, let's end with that.
Let's end with that.
I watched a video today of Dodger spring training and hearing the sound of the bat hitting the ball off of Mookie Betts' bat. Oh my God! It makes you forget it's 180 below zero outside.
I absolutely love the start of baseball season. I wish the Yankees had thought to hire a third baseman this year.
Yeah,
that would be nice.
If they only had some money.
If we only had some money. Well, Hal Steinbrenner needs another yacht. Peyton asks, Peyton, bring in the tough questions.
I saw this question before, and I was hoping that one would get.
How do each of you? There's several parts of it. How do each of you define Christian nationalism? Is it a good or bad thing? Has there been an uptick in Christian nationalist legislation at the legislature and in recent years? Let's take the first part first. Christian nationalism. I think it's very, for me, it's very specific when you want laws and policies that elevate Christianity above the other religions. Because in my mind, the American tradition is we're treating all the religions equally. And I don't even believe in, because people say, well, the separation of church and state. And I don't, that is not how I see it, because I don't know that it needs to be separate, because the people who get elected to office, they're allowed to bring their faith with them, and they're allowed to govern through that lens, right? It's part of their convictions. Of course it's going to guide them if they have that faith. Where I think it transcends into being problematic is when you start trying to create a law that elevates your set of beliefs above others.
Yeah, so I agree with all of that. I also agree that we are seeing an uptick in legislation, and I think it's a bad thing. I've mentioned on this podcast many times sort of the big government Republicans that I think we're seeing often when it comes to issues around religious and other things. We've seen this session, 10 Commandments. We've seen chaplains in every public school. We've seen all kinds of issues like that. Christ is King resolution. They've all been defeated so far. So I think that while there may be more efforts to sort of push a Christian nationalist agenda into our public sphere, I think the legislature is by and large defeating those things this session. And I think it's part of its elections, right? The moderate Republicans, not moderate, the normie Republicans, traditional, had a really good primary.
Yeah.
So they're saying we don't have to support this stuff in the future, and I think that's good for the state.
That was my hypothesis, several weeks ago, was that some of these bills were going to have a tougher time. And again, I think it was because further removed from the pandemic, which created just some very weird cultural ripples. And then also, I think it proved that you don't have to kneel down to some of this stuff. There were a lot of moderate Republicans who resisted that, who got mailers sent out and saying they're anti-Christian, they're pro-pedophile, they're all pretty terrible things, and they survived. Some of those races were close, don't get me wrong.
Well, I mean, a primary, there's going to be 1,000 people that vote, and it's going to be close no matter what, right? Because there's not that many votes. But I will say, I mentioned the 10 Commandments, I mentioned chaplains, I mentioned Christ is King. There was also a bill that I think was scheduled to be on the Senate floor today that would say intelligent design had to be part of science curriculum. I mean, it's basically creationism. And that got the do not pass out of committee as well. So I think that's another example of attempts. Unfortunately, that one was supported by both majority leaders. They were co-sponsors of that. They're in the paper saying they supported it. That's the kind of stuff that we shouldn't be pushing into our curriculum, to push one religion over another. And again, I think teaching about religion and all religions, a super good thing.
And again, also, I don't have a problem with people bringing their faith. That's why I don't like the separation of church and state. I say you bring it all in, and you treat it all equally, even up to, I mean, there's almost the sort of cliched debate about the Ten Commandments monument in the public square. I don't mind a Ten Commandments monument if you're going to make room for the other ones.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think if you're going to have the 10 Commandments, and we've talked about this, that, the idea that just simply posting the 10 Commandments or having a chaplain in a school is going to take care of all the ills of public society is short-sighted in terms of what we need in public policies.
I think it's lazy because it's really what they're saying is, kids are spending too much time on YouTube and they're doing all these terrible, and the thing is how old that is too, right? I'm old enough to remember that Hillary Clinton, senator at the time, Hillary Clinton, telling me that I was going to grow up to be a terrible person because I played Doom video games. Like, I'm of that generation. Some of it's just teen panic of the sort that we've been seeing since, people had their skirts over their head about Elvis, swiveling his hips around. It's never
skirts over their head, huh? That's an interesting.
It's a good. That's why I make my living with words.
Yeah, Britain.
Yeah, well, I'm better in writing than I am speaking. The thing is it never changes. That's something that frustrates me, and I guess surprises me too, because sometimes when we're talking about book bans, like, you read about, like, the intelligent design thing. Well, you can read about Inherit the Wind, like William Jennings Bryan and Clarence. We had this debate. And you kind of think, well, that's over, right? We had the debate. It's over. We're not going to do it again. Well, we do it again. It all repeats itself over and over.
Well, and I also think the Christ is King resolution. I mean, Jessica Bell said it earlier. There's more messaging bills like that earlier, that the only goal of that is to get people on record to say that legislators don't think Christ is king.
That's going to end up in a mailer.
Yeah, and
it's going to be in a mailer.
Stupid.
And it's going to be in big, bold. It's going to be that somebody is against religious freedom or is against Christianity. And then way down in the fine print where they're hoping you don't look is going to be a reference to that vote. And that's really what that was all about.
And it's just the opposite of religious freedom, right? I mean, basically saying, and they say, it doesn't choose one religion over another. It does.
Well, Representative Van Winkle made it very clear on the floor how she felt. And I don't have her quote in front of me, but she essentially said, this is the truth. And it doesn't matter what anybody else believes. This is the truth. Therefore, it's okay to put it in there. Well, it's the truth for you. Yeah. It's the truth in your, and that's fine. If Christians feel that way, that's fine. The problem is we live in a pluralistic society where everybody's guaranteed freedom of religion, and we cannot have the government endorsing one over the other.
Yes, and it's such a simple thing. And I, you said earlier, it's hard to identify conservative, liberal, where people are. It's hard to identify some of these bills as being conservative when it really is the government making decisions for people. Yeah, I mean, and the idea of the library books. Something that drives me crazy is this legislature and the Senate's passed a bill that says parents have the fundamental rights over every aspect of their children's life. Then they pass bills that say, well, libraries have to do this, and we have to force them to do the pledge. We have to do this. We have to do this. So you appreciate the fundamental rights of parents as long as those parents are doing exactly what you want them to do. That frustrates me. I mean, I may be progressive, I may be left to center, but on some of these things, I just want the government to stay the hell out of my life and let me raise my kid and my family.
Exactly right. As far as whether or not there's been more, I don't know. I would have to go back and count bills. I feel like we have about the same number of cultural bills. I'm trying to think of one that's passed yet, though.
Yeah, we were talking during the break. I can't think of one, and there's a couple that are still have not been defeated, but they've gotten do not passes out of committee. Again, I think the legislature deserves some amount of credit for standing up against these things because we haven't seen that in the past. But I think that some people are maybe, they feel more comfortable in their actual opinions and how they can handle the politics of it.
I want to pivot from there to something we talked about, kind of close the show out. I think a common theme we interviewed 2 current lawmakers and then 2 former lawmakers. And the thing is, the legislature's changing. Some of it is just the culture's changing. There's a political, ideological realignment.
More nationalization.
More nationalization. But then the other thing, term limits are coming down. I think the legislature is going to have to change some ways they do their business. I think it's just going to have to happen. And I don't know what it is. I mean, we talked about the bill allowing the leaders to sort of act as a clearinghouse for legislation and try to condense some of these ideas. You know, that's going to be tough because sometimes there's a lot of big egos out there and they want to be the one on the bill.
But we don't need one legislator introducing 30, 35 bills. We talked to Senator Weber about this. He said he introduced 4 bills and he's going to usher every one of those through.
Right.
If you are somebody like Ben Koppelman who's introducing 30 some odd bills, he's not doing due diligence to make sure those are good bills and make sure people understand those bills.
They supporting.
Yeah.
And supporting them in committee, supporting them in.
And sometimes if you believe in a policy, you have to do some organizing and you have to build coalitions around that. But I mean, I would like to see, none of these things are going to be particularly popular. I'd like to see limits on the amount of bills that an individual legislator can introduce. I'd like to see annual sessions. I do think that will make it harder for citizen legislators to serve, so we have to pay them more. But I also would like to see us to be able to kill bills in committee. I mean, we've got to be the only state that can't defeat a bill in committee. So you have these committees who spend hours and hours and hours debating something. They give it a 10-2 do not pass, like the Prairie Public funding. Send to the floor and they pass it. That's not the people who did the due diligence. Yeah, what's the point of the committee if you're just going to let the people on the floor vote? So defeat bills on the.
Well, even if we're doing amendments on the floors now too.
Yeah,
you know, what are we even doing in committee? And the thing, I'm not.
It's in a minority voice, the floor amendments that I kind of like.
And I'm not necessarily criticizing that, but it seems like we're making the committee superfluous.
Right.
And that's.
And I also think having annual sessions, and maybe it's 40 and 40 or something like that, we can more effective, like the interim to me is a joke. When you pass interim studies and an interim committee basically has one person come and talk about it and, oh, we've done the study and nothing comes about that. I think there's things that we can do better during the interim as well to make the session more efficient. Because I think one of the things Senator Hogue said, that you end up just trying to churn out the bills when you have 1,200 or 1,100.
Well, the problem is you're sending a lot of things to study to the interim committees. A lot of them don't get studied.
Right. Yeah. But I think even just like at this point, leading up to crossover, they've got to get all these bills out. And so you do have committees who are maybe moving too quick on things because they've spent so much time on so many bills that I think we can do a little bit better diving into the important stuff.
I don't think there's anything wrong with triage. And I think the committee killing bills thing is always the one that I get the most pushback on, where people are like, oh, we don't want to do that, and corruption and powerful committee chairs doing it. Well, then build in some pressure relief valves. You know, maybe allow a supermajority motion that has to be passed by supermajority from the floor to grab a bill out of committee if they're going to table it.
And that's exactly what a lot of states do, right? I mean, so there's a way to release a bill from committee if the majority of the people on the floor want to see it, a supermajority, like 60 or...
And the thing is that you can't get to those majorities for your bill.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't deserve to pass.
Right.
It's a democratic process. Even if it's a worthy hit.
And it puts more power in the hands of the people who are really studying these bills. The reality is, I mean, I spent a lot of time watching House Education and Senate Education. Those people spend a lot more time in these bills. I don't agree with a lot of them on stuff, but at
least they're doing the work.
Yeah, particularly House Education. They do a lot of work. There's a lot of bills that come out 8-6, 6-8, 7-7, because there's a real ideological divide. And there's left, right, and everybody in between, and they work these things.
Well, I think that's the message I took from the interviews tonight is there's change coming for the legislature, whether we like it or not. And some things are going to have to change in order for that body to continue serving the state of North Dakota the way it needs to.
Well, and I think the other thing that we need to reflect on as a state is the conversation we had with Jessica and Erin. You know, both of them are very happy to not be in the legislature. But I think we need people like Erin and Jessica who are willing to serve in the legislature. What can we do to make this environment better so more people with kids, family, younger, whatever, can serve? And I think part of it is
sorts of people. I mean, we want a spectrum.
Yeah, we want people and we're going to have to pay people more in order to do that.
It's always unpopular.
It's always unpopular, but we don't want just people who can afford to be in the legislature to be in the legislature. We need a variety of different opinions. And if we want better policy, we need to have long conversations.
I think, and last comment, I think we want to avoid the trajectory that has us ending up where Washington D.C.'s at right now.
Yeah, you don't want a full-time legislature either, right?
No, but also we don't want the dysfunction either, because our legislature is still functional. There's still a lot of good work being done there.
Even though sometimes you watch the House floor and you question it, I would encourage you to go and watch the fluoride conversation from earlier today. I didn't feel like the legislature was functioning during that conversation.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to say about fluoride. All right, we're gonna.
Well,
stop
I'm
there.
for it.
I'm ambivalent one way or the other. I just don't believe that it's this terrible thing. Anyway, we're gonna stop there. Thank you so much. Thank you, by the way, to Matt Fern.
Matt Fern killing it. How about some applause for Matt Fern?
Yeah. Our hardworking producer,
Matt Fern, the most popular person in the building, and the incredible crew.
his crew, who has to sit through our audio and video and edit it and cut it and make us look good.
And I've been trying to unionize the whole time I've been here, that crew.
Yeah, no comment.
Yeah. Matt's opposed.
Matt's opposed. All right. Well,
I didn't ask him.
no, you didn't. All right. Well, that was great. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again.
That was fun.
That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
If I got paid for correcting Chad Oban,
She'd be a rich woman.
rich woman.
One thing I'm not getting paid for is being a marriage counselor. So let's get back on topic.
We're doing fine.